So this is one of my favorite stories. It's called Windows. So, it takes place on a faraway mountainside, far up in the north. A lumberjack had been cut out in the cold for far too long. The wind began to blow and the snow began to fall. Beautiful white crystals sparkling across the forest. He had finished up work for the evening, but he had lost his way. He had no idea how to get off the mountain. And so he stumbled and he traveled as best as he could, but the snow kept blowing, the wind kept howling, and that level of white snow on the ground rose higher and higher, and the sun overhead drew shorter and shorter, until the entire mountainside was covered in black nightness. Well, at this point, the snow was up over his knees, and he knew that if he was stuck out here for too much longer, he would surely catch his death of frostbite. He looked desperately as far as he could, desperately looking, calling for help, screaming at the top of his lungs, desperately looking for any shelter whatsoever. And then, barely illuminated by a very, very small shard of the moon, a cabin. A flood of relief swept through him. He rushed toward the cabin, trudging through the snow. He knocked desperately on the door. No answer came to him. The cabin seemed to have no lights coming from inside. He tries the door handle, and with a very, very loud creaking sound, the door opens in. The snow drifts covering the entryway. He walks inside, looks around the room. There's no one there, completely empty. But at the far end of the cabin, a bed that's been prepared. Blankets, quilts, comforters, enough to keep him bundled up and warm throughout the night. He rushes over to the bed, practically jumps into it, wraps himself up in these warm, toasty blankets. Shivering furiously, he slowly begins to warm up, and he looks up and around the cabin room. In the very low light, he's able to see paintings along the side of the cabin. A dozen of them, lining up and down the entire cabin. Every single one of the paintings had a different portrait in it. A portrait of a person, men and women alike. But every single portrait was drawn, was painted with a ferocious scowl that looked down at the bed. He, of course, couldn't think anything more of it. A strange design choice, certainly, but they are mere paintings. He wraps himself tighter, throws one of the quilts over his head, and is fast asleep. He sleeps fitfully, but thoroughly throughout the evening. The sun comes up, light scatters through the cabin. He rouses himself from his slumber, gets out of bed, and looks around to see that the paintings in the cabin were not paintings at all. They were windows. That's one of my favorite ones.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Anyone else have a good ghost story to share?